Maeda recommended they simply blockade Bataan while the rest of the archipelago was occupied, reasoning that by that time MacArthur's men would have probably been starved out and they would be ready to surrender. While Maeda presented a compelling case, Homa deemed this unacceptable to, forego what could be a faster victory. To Homa, Tokyo could not allow such a perceived loss of face. Nevertheless, to execute the plans, Homa swallowed his
Uh,
pride.
but if I'm not mistaken, he's already lost a lot of face to Tokyo.
Oh yeah, he's being dramatically shit on. He's taking too long in their view because they had a strict timetable, but they also took away the units he needed to do the job, which is kind of sad. And no one likes him in Tokyo. And I think in the previous episode I mentioned he was called, or his nickname was the Poet General. He was, I don't know what you want to call him, an Anglophile. He liked Anglos, and he had a lot of experience overseas, and he was seen to be a little bit too gentle.
Too nice.
Yeah, he wanted to fight a gentleman's war, and this was not happening. Like, none of the Japanese commanders wanted to fight a gentleman's war in the Pacific. It was not like that.
Did you? I think you're probably aware, Craig, but maybe for the audience, quite a few of his command staff were under the influence of how you call the most hated man of World War II,
Yep,
Suji Masanobu.
yeah. It's surprising how a guy who wasn't a very high-ranking figure had such a massive impact on the overall war. Like, yeah, he's a terrible human being. And yeah, Homa, much like General Yamashita, but I think more so because General Yamashita, I would say he wasn't guilty of a lot of things that he did, but he was a cutthroat. He was a brutal guy too.
He
like
was, he was, but I guess maybe at least Yamashita was already very well known in comparison to General Homa.
yes, and Yamashita was hated for a completely different reason. He went against Tojo, so Tojo basically used the entire Tosa faction to just shit on him. That's actually something I'm writing about right now too in the background. So interesting. Politics in the Japanese military this time is very interesting stuff. Um,
Well, I mean, I'll just say this: both technically commanded armies at this time, but Yamashita at least would get an area army by the end of the war.
yeah, yeah. Yamashita got dealt a bad hand of cards at the end, though. It's funny. He was like the guy that everyone hated, yet he was given like one of the most important missions. But yeah, a telegram actually arrived to Homa from Tokyo, prompting some tears to fill in his eyes as he read it. Tojo expressed disappointment. Victories have been recorded throughout the war in all of the other theaters, except for the Philippines. Homa apparently fainted upon reading this news, and he had to be carried out of the room. And I would believe that quote. He was known to be pretty. I mean, he was a drama guy too. He did drama, but he was a pretty emotional guy. Now, back on Corregidor, President Quezon listened furiously to Roosevelt on the radio, who stated that thousands of aircraft would soon be dispatched to the battlefield, Europe. That must have really sucked.
It's kind of like saying I'm dispatching the battle like assets, but how you have the investment documents with the asterisks that terms and conditions apply.
Yeah,
It's pretty
exactly.
much that.
Quezon actually was seen to exclaim, "For 30 years I have worked and hoped for my people. Now they burn and die for a flag that could not protect them. Por Dios y a todos los santos." I apologize for my Spanish. "I cannot stand this constant reference to England, to Europe. Where are the planes this Civigenza, scoundrel in English, is boasting about? How American is this wrath and anguish for a distant cousin while a daughter is being raped in the back room?" That's a big quote. Jeez. Yeah.
Damn.
Quezon, he summoned his cabinet and he expressed his intention to request from Roosevelt that the Philippines become independent again, allowing for neutrality and leaving the Americas. But again, as we discussed, this was not going to do anything. The Japanese were,
It's past the point that it doesn't really matter.
yeah, and MacArthur, he was in a rock and a hard place because he's very good personal friends with Quezon, and he's kind of trying to defend him as well. and he sends his own like requests, to Washington, but FDR, rejects a lot of these requests and says, we can't possibly do this. So, yeah, it's not looking good, to say the least. But at one point, in kind of a masterful diplomatic move, he writes to Quezon, so long as the flag of the United States flies on Filipino soil, it will be defended by our own men to the death. Whatever happens to the present American garrison, we shall not relax our efforts until the forces which are now marshaling outside the Philippines return to the Philippines and drive out the last remnants of the invaders from your soil. So FDR is trying to, put a little saving grace on this. And apparently Quezon was a little bit overwhelmed by the words, and, he swore to himself that he would stand by America regardless of the consequences for his people or himself. And I mean, he doesn't really have a choice. The Japanese are going to conquer the Philippines, and it's going to be brutal, absolutely brutal on the Filipino people. It's a horrible time for them. And mind you, I'm going to just say this for anybody who's, a Filipino member of the audience. Let's acknowledge the Americans were also very bad to the Filipino people well before this. I think the Japanese were worse, but, it's not good for them nonetheless. But this account comes from, I have some notes here from a book it's an older one. It's a little bit it's pretty famous. It's The Rising Sun by John Toland. It's a staple amongst Pacific War literature, where he followed up a message that went to MacArthur. The duty and necessity of resisting the Japanese aggression to the last transcends in importance any other obligation now facing us in the Philippines. I particularly request that you proceed rapidly to the organization of your forces and your defenses to make your resistance as effective as circumstances will permit and as prolonged as humanly possible. So, MacArthur's been given some pretty bombastic orders. The Philippines is basically a lost cause, and MacArthur is now he's being seen as a symbol of resistance, because you have to most of the places where Americans are in the Pacific are already defeated. We're looking at places like Wake, Guam and such, but MacArthur's still in the fight, and this is the only real fight that's going on right now between America and Japan.
And
So
I guess this, since it's also reaching the time where APTACOM was formed
yeah,
among like land force generals, he's literally by rank the senior most active, right?
yeah. After him is De Potten over in the Dutch East Indies, who's about to get the shit kicked out of him. But yeah, it's MacArthur for now, and MacArthur is the only face of the American military in the Pacific at that time. And this is another reason, alongside, this council he's made to do press releases for him, that it bombasts him to be like the face of the Pacific War in many ways. Kind of just got thrusted. It got thrusted upon him in many ways. MacArthur actually responded to FDR of this quote: I have not the slightest intention in the world of surrendering or capitulating the Philippine element of my command. There has never been the slightest wavering amongst the troops. So, in the typical fashion, he's exaggerating. The reality is that his men are riddled with dysentery and malaria. They're starving on half rations. Some of them don't have proper uniforms, like the sailors, and they're still there holding the line. So they're earning the nickname they get, which is the battling bastards of Bataan. Unfortunately, as we had mentioned just a bit previously before this, the Japanese are now going to be conducting some amphibious assaults. And things are going to change. They are going to... It's not going to go as well for the Japanese, but yeah, it's going to be pretty fun. So on the morning of January the 23rd, 300 Japanese soldiers landed, began advancing towards what is known as Logoshokan Point. Now, if you look at the map... Sorry, I have to pull up the map. Down here. They landed far too south of where they were supposed to be. So we're looking at what it says Luzon Point and Quinanin Point. Whoop. Get my notes back. Despite their best efforts, the Japanese maintained their beachhead firmly under intense artillery and mortar bombardment. As soon as they landed, they were attacked by the coffee-stained sailors I had mentioned and some Marine commanders that were hastily put together with a few soldiers. Meanwhile, the defenders were striving to eject the Japanese from the Logoscoan Point. 600 more Japanese successfully infiltrated the Quinanin Point. That's just about 7 miles to its north. A stalemate soon ensued between the Japanese and the mismatched force of 550 defenders, comprised of Air Force Pursuit Squadron guys, interceptor commanders, some Filipino constabulary, so it's policemen and sailors. Given the circumstances, it was not surprising that progress in dislodging the Japanese infiltrators was quite minimal.